today on the program we have the hosts of the program are the Netherlands, Wim and Dirk, and we have as our guests Jenni and David Marquet. So Jenni Jepsen from Denmark and David Marquet from the East Coast. I'm going to hand it over to you, please. Let's learn about how this process of letting go leads to actually greatness, and what do you have to do as a human being to get there.
Yeah, so Wim Heemskerk here from the Netherlands. I'll try to ask some questions to keep this going. And personally, I got into this leader instead of leader-follower by a hint from a friend. And I saw some of the videos, and I read the book afterwards. And there's a lot of encouragement in there to do it yourself. But oh dear, what the heck? So first question for David: when you started to do this, weren't you just really afraid to completely lose control?
Yeah, I was. It feels unnatural to give control. So my story for the listeners who haven't really heard it was I was going to be the captain of a nuclear submarine. I trained for a year to go to one submarine, and at the last minute I shifted to another submarine. It wasn't a very well-performing submarine. And when I got there, I was petrified because what do captains do? They give orders, and crews follow orders. And since I didn't know the specific details of that submarine, I didn't really understand how it was going to work. And I saw firsthand the detriments of that way of doing business. And for me, it's bad. It's bad in three ways. It's bad for the organization, it's bad for the boss, and it's bad for the people. It's bad for the organization because the organization can never be any better, any smarter, any more creative, have any more ideas than the person at the top. It's bad for the boss because the boss is always in demand. People are always coming to the boss, asking the boss questions, or the captain all day, all night, never getting a good night's sleep, so it's burnout. And number three is it's bad for the people because they're frustrated, they have ideas, they're thinking, no one's listening to them. Who wants to show up at work and just be told what to do all day long? Nobody. So we tried a new path, which was what we called after the fact. We called it leader, and the idea was let's get everybody thinking, acting as leaders. What do leaders do? Well, they make decisions, and they're thinkers, and this is what we focused on. The way we implemented it was this idea, as you said, fundamentally of giving control, of me ceding control to the crew. Now, when we say control, I'm talking about operational control. It's decisions like submerging the ship, surfacing the ship, loading a torpedo, overhauling a pump. All these day-to-day operational decisions that happen on board a submarine in any business all over the planet. I didn't cede control, however, in terms of the environment or the structure under which we were going to operate. And I think this is where people get scared because when they think of ceding control, they imagine chaos, everybody doing their own thing. And this is the farthest thing from what we had. You don't want chaos, especially on a nuclear submarine. I kind of think of it now as a skeleton and flesh, right? All animals have some sort of hard matter, a skeleton. It's for a lobster, it's on the outside. For a human, it's on the inside. And we have flesh. Well, if you never define the skeleton, then you're always micromanaging how you assemble this organism, and you're always going around telling people what to do in the minute decisions, where to surface, where to submerge, and all that kind of thing. However, if you define what you're trying to do, then you can divest that day-to-day decision-making to your people. It frees you up to think about more things. They get more satisfaction over their jobs because they're deciding not only how to do their jobs, but what really should happen. Should we submerge the ship? Shouldn't we submerge the ship? Where should we position the ship? Should we release the software? Should we not release the software? So one of the ways that this is different, people say, oh, this is just delegation on steroids. Yeah, not really, because delegation means the boss is still deciding the decisions. Oh, we're going to release software next week, but you can decide how. In this model, the employees are actually going the next step and saying, you know what, we're going to do the release next week, or we're going to push the release off a week, or we're going to add the following features to the software release. So they're not only deciding how to do it, but what to do it. But the reason why they can do that is because they have a deep understanding of the purpose of the organization and of their job. So in this kind of an environment, we spend more time on intent and more time on purpose, but less time on micromanaging instructions. So that's sort of my. Let me just open with that and see if you have any reactions, or if Jenny wants to jump in.
You said the team can push a release back for a week. If I would go to my manager, I'm in software at the moment, and if I would go to my manager tomorrow and tell him that, he would say, no, I mean, come on, someone has to be in control of that. And weren't you as a captain also responsible and required to really take control and handle certain things themselves? I mean, we're talking US Navy here, right? So there must be books of regulations on that. How did you deal with that? Weren't you just obligated to do certain things?
Well, the rules do say the captain will be the one who authorizes a whole host of things, like starting up the reactor and shutting down the reactor and getting the ship underway and that kind of stuff. So we played a little bit of a game because I still had the opportunity to intervene. But in the old way, I would walk into the control room and I would point to the chart and I would say, hey, submerge the ship right here at 10 o'clock. And in the new way, I would walk into the control room and I would ask the officers of the deck, the young men who are actually in control of driving the ship, I would say, what's your plan? And they'd say, well, Captain, our intention is to submerge the ship here at 10 o'clock. And I would say, very well, and I'd walk away. Because they had already done the thinking about it, they'd already understood what the mission was, and they'd already made that decision. So that psychological shift for them from just, oh, I'll just react and the captain comes out here and tells me what to do, to, gee, I really need to figure out what we're going to do, and then convey that to the captain. So technically, I still was I still had the responsibility of the submarine doing the right things, but I divested the authority as much as possible. And this doesn't mean, oh, by the way, and I've seen this mistake happen, that I give you the authority and then you go out and you disappear and you're doing stuff without me knowing about it. One of the advantages of saying you have to come to me and get permission is now at least we have a conversation. But if I say, look, you get to decide the software release, that doesn't mean you just decide it and don't tell anybody. Right? So one of the things that we always guard against is this does not mean that we're not communicating. So you would say, hey, boss, for the following reasons, I intend to delay the release a week, or I intend to add the following additional 2 features, whatever your intention is. Or based on where you are, you might even say, look, I've already made the decision. We're pushing the release 1 week. I've already notified our vendors. So I don't know where I got started, but that's basically the deal.
There are 2 things that are required in order to succeed in giving control, and that is clarity and competence. And David, you've already talked about that without sort of naming it. The skeleton is the clarity, so the leader at whatever level is providing the vision, the purpose, so people understand why they are doing something. But the second part is a little trickier because that's about competence. Do you trust your people? Do they have the capabilities to do the job, to make those decisions? And I think for a lot of leaders or managers in organizations, they're afraid of that. The fear of losing control is about fear of, do my people have the capability, the competencies to actually make those decisions? And when you trust that they do, or at least willing to try, what happens in our brains are 2 things. So from the employee perspective, they feel they have more autonomy, which boosts dopamine in our brains. That's a reward hormone in our brains that makes us feel good. And that's good on their side. And what happens on the other side is that rather than filling those gaps of uncertainty with fear, so that loss of control with fear, what happens for the leader or the manager is that they see, oh yeah, okay, all right, this is okay. It was kind of scary to give them this decision, but I can see that they made the right one, and it gets easier then for the leader to continue to do that.
Yeah, and I love Jenny's work because I I wasn't trained in any of this. We were just trying things, and some things we sort of accidentally stumbled on things at work. And now when I talk to Jenny, I understand what's really going on in our heads, and kind of got lucky. But here's a little test. Here's a little test just to see how hard it is to give up control. Go with someone else that doesn't really know you very well for coffee, and say, look, you order for me. So even though it's just a cup of coffee, this raises a lot of anxiety for a lot of people. And if you have some food allergies, fine, you can bound it and you say, I'm allergic to vanilla or whatever. But it's a fun experiment, and just think, if it's so hard to give up control for something as simple and meaningless as coffee, well, I mean, coffee is really important, especially in Europe. But something like coffee. Well, what about something important that's happening at work? So one of the things we like to do is play. Okay, let's do. Oh, okay, we got coffee. Now let's try a whole dinner, or let's pick the seats at the theater, or let's start practicing this idea of giving up control. It's gonna make you anxious, just like Jenny said. It's gonna feel anxious. And we can mitigate that anxiety a little bit through some activities. But more importantly, it's the idea that this is what it feels like, and I'm going to do it anyway in the face of this anxiety, but I'm going to bound it, just like Jenny said. We're going to take small steps, right? We're going to start with coffee. We're not just going to go straight to, oh, you guys decide whether we should start at the reactor or not. That's crazy. Don't do that, because you don't understand what people's level of competence and clarity is. And they start making bad decisions. Well, you were the one who made the bad decision when you let them make that decision. So we have a lot of fun with these with these activities and role-playing games where we practice giving up control. And it's hard for me because I always make a commitment. If I'm going to ask the people, the people to do it, I'm going to do it myself. I'm going to eat my own dog food, and so I always have this. I keep finding it, difficult in my own life. I think it's just really hard. You have to continually work at it.
Yeah, and I think that for the problems I see in organizations in the Netherlands right now, is for example that giving up control is one of the major problems for getting the organizations more flexible. Yeah. It's something like, okay, we want the employees to be more flexible, and we like to stay in control, something like that.
Yeah.
So it's that tension that I find in lots of organizations, and that's not only in the IT, but also in all kinds of work. And reading the book, I thought, okay, this is really something that can help really achieve those objectives of flexible organizations and making work much more flexible, making employees think for themselves instead of asking whether they are allowed to start an hour later or earlier. And that's really the inspiration I found in the book.
Yeah, Dirk, I think you're making a link that I was also thinking of. I mean, we were talking about coffee, so it should be easy to bring it back to companies. I mean, lots of coffee in any office, usually lousy. But we were also thinking of talking about making people think for themselves as the major difference. So if you want to be flexible and you can make people think, well, basically ahead of time, then, as David said, I'm not really giving all responsibility away, at least not before they're ready, so they still have to check in if I'm the boss. But rather than waiting for the status meeting and telling them, well, we got a major problem with this release, you would probably get a solution as well. Is that sort of the way we should be thinking this? David, Jenny, can you pitch in here?
I think it's what I see in the organizations that I'm working with, where I'm helping transition to a leader-leader model in the organizations. The leaders are more afraid of what will happen when they give up control. So it isn't that the people that are working aren't competent. At least most of them are very, very competent, so they can make the decision. It's more the trust. Can I trust that this will be okay, even though I'm not controlling that? So, as a boss, I think it's more about the boss than it is the employee.
What I'm trying to figure out is, if you are that traditional boss, why the heck are you going to make that jump? Will that be in your story? I hope it will be in your story.
I think so. I think so. So in this company, they are transitioning to working in an agile way. So going from traditional sort of waterfall ways of working to agile. And the entire company is moving. So it's not just their IT area, it's every area in the organization. And part of that, we're taking it in small steps. So we're not doing an all-out, here tomorrow we're starting everybody's agile. That's not how it's going to work. But before this a few weeks ago, we got together with all the line leaders, the middle managers, about 25 of them in the organization, and it was decided that we are going to a team, so a dedicated team approach in the organization. So rather than people being allocated to projects, the projects will now be allocated to the teams. Well, this caused major anxiety for those line leaders because they felt, okay, I no longer have control. I can't decide who's the best person for the project. How is this going to work? Will they have the competency to do this? And on and on and on. We had a series of workshops. We strongly recommended that they let the teams, the members of the employees, decide which team they wanted to be on. The line leaders kind of named what the teams would be so that they had control over what those teams sort of were and what the competencies that they were looking for each of those teams. The trick was then to get those line leaders to talk to their employees and let the employees decide where they wanted to be. This took a lot of, this took several workshops, shall we say. Mm-hmm. So helping them get over their anxiety about doing this, so it wouldn't go into complete chaos. What ended up happening is that each of those line leaders talked to their people about what was going to happen. For the most part, people were very enthusiastic. There were a few that said, no, I don't want that decision. I want you to tell me what to do. That's another thing that they need to deal with. However, most were really happy about having the ability to at least give their first, second, and third choices of which teams they wanted to be on. The line leaders were very clear that maybe not all the wishes would be granted, but they would do their best to get people at least their second choice, if not the first. So what ended up happening in the end is that all the line leaders got together, they had all their wishes from their employees, and they mapped it out on this table with colors. So first choice was green, any other choices were yellow, and if people absolutely didn't want to be on a team, they had a little red mark on there. In the end, what we saw were no red, there were just a couple of yellows, so not everybody got their first wish, but everyone else, and we're talking 150 employees, got their first wish. And I asked just a couple weeks after the teams got together, what's the reaction in the organization about this? Are people upset? Are they okay? How are the line leaders? They said it was the best thing that they'd ever done in their organization in terms of creating teams and transitioning to a different way of working, that people were really happy and nobody is off in the corner complaining about, oh, this boss decided this and I don't want to be here anymore. So it is hard. It is hard to do it. It's hard to give up control. And for consultants or leaders who are working in this area, understand that it takes time, it takes patience, and you just have to try it. Try it, do it, decide, go for it, act your way to new thinking, David says, and it works. It works in our brains. And even if you take all that neuroscience aside, you can see the happiness, the motivation that people have when they're able to have some influence in the work that they're doing.
So how the heck do we get in? We want it. What's my path? How do I become a leader-style leader? Tell me.
First of all, Wim, let me back you up a little bit. I never try and, quote, convince anyone that this is the right way to go, because I think if you don't, in your heart, if you're not in your heart frustrated at some degree by what's going on in today's business place, some words that I say are not going to change your mind. But I think there's enough frustration out there, both on the part of the bosses who feel overwhelmed and they feel like they're the only person thinking, and on the part of everybody else in the organization who feels neglected, ignored, unvalued. There's enough of that frustration that people say, you know, we got to do something different. So I just wanted to come back. But yeah, so you take small steps, like Jenny said, and we put these things out, like these coffee things out, in something I call a nudge. It's a weekly nudge. People can sign up for that. They can sign up for the program that Jenny and I do, the Lead4Greatness course, where you get both practical things to do and the science behind it. And I'm really excited to share with you my little prompt here, which are my Legos. You see my Legos here? These are these toys we have in America. I don't know if you have them over there.
Hello, they come from Denmark.
Yeah. So imagine you have a box of Legos, a small box of Legos, and you're the boss, and your job is to get your people to build, quote, a house. Now, there's two ways you can do it. I can say, take the long yellow Lego, place it on the table. Take the short blue Lego, place it on top of the long yellow Lego at a right angle at one end. And you can go on like this for about 45 minutes, and eventually you'll have a house. But the people who did it aren't going to feel very exhilarated by what they've built. Or you could say, here are your Legos. I want you to go build a house. There's some fundamental requirement. It's got to stand on its own. Whatever else there is. Given that, go build a house. Now, the house they build may look different than the house that's in your head. You may be picturing a four-sided house, and they may build a teepee. Who knows? But if it satisfies the requirements that you have, who cares?
What really attracted me to David, and what I think we do differently in the program that we offer, is that not only do we have the science that backs it up, and of course the wonderful story, which is entertaining and fun in itself, there are the mechanisms there on how to do this. So the leaders who attend the course, for instance, get to practice. And we don't ask them to change their whole way of being. There are certain things that they can do to try, little experiments like the coffee experiment, but many, many others around listening and empathy and giving up control and yeah, a lot of things. Valuing people so that they get those sort of baby steps, if you will, that they can practice. Because to try to change who you are or change your entire way of being, forget that. That doesn't work. I mean, you may as well save your money and, you know, keep reading the books that come out, because you're not actually going to change. You need to decide this is what you want to do. Pick one thing, one small thing. Don't pick everything. Just one small thing and try it. Repeat it over and over. Get some positive feedback. Feel good about it yourself, and then it becomes a way of working for you. And then try the next thing. So it's very much about not trying to change the entire, you know, move completely away from the way you're working, but get better incrementally.
David mentioned his nudge newsletter, and then if you want a bigger nudge, you can roll into the leadership program, the Lead4Greatness program, right? And what you told us was an example from that, and you will learn how to take many more small steps. Is that the right way to do it? I'm just fishing for more information here on that program of yours.
Two things have to happen, right? All we do is we take people who say, look, I'm dissatisfied with what's going on. It doesn't feel good. I want a different way of doing business. This other way sounds okay. And we give them the tools. We give them the words to say. We give them the voice. We practice. So if someone comes to you and says, hey, boss, there's a problem with the software, period, and they're not providing a solution, instead of you saying, okay, well, tell me about it. Let me solve the problem for you. You said you asked, well, what do you think we should do? So it's just training ourselves in all these different little steps, and then going out and practicing that.
Each participant also creates their own personal Lead for Greatness plan so that they can take the mechanisms that they want to focus on and put that into the plan, and it's a very agile plan, so it's prioritized, and there are dates in there, and it's on Post-its usually, but not always, depending on the person, so that it becomes something very dynamic for them, a plan that they can revisit and reprioritize depending on what happens. And then we don't just sort of leave people after they create that plan. We follow up with them. We've got a group on LinkedIn where participants can come and share their experiences and get some advice, and we do follow-up calls and a follow-up day, and so they have a chance to actually work the plan and then come back. And of course there are challenges and things that maybe didn't go as well as they had hoped for, and other things that went better than they hoped for. So participants coming together and sharing the experiences really deepens the learning from the course, and I think that is something else that sort of sets us apart from some of the other programs.
Yeah.
And I think that might be a good note to start to wrap it up with. Dirk already mentioned it. Dirk and I got into this and really want to bring you over to our country as well to run this program. And yeah, because we think this is a really open way to step into it, the small steps, the great story behind it and all that. And we were also linking it to the things we see around that. And maybe Dirk wants to say a bit more about that and call it a wrap. Is that an idea?
Yeah. You know, I like the idea that Jenny told in the conversation about the small steps, and that's also the way we would like to proceed. And one of the small steps is just start talking about it. Just start talking about it with everyone we can find and we have in our network. And the other thing is, okay, if we have one-on-ones, it would be nice to have one-on-mores. So that is the idea of the dîner pensant that we are going to put in the air. And actually, a dinner is also a really nice place to try out some things like losing control or not being in control. Because it starts with having trust in the competence of the cook who puts the food together. What is it? Is it edible? Like the coffee, are all the components right for me? And you can play with that. And that's what we do. We use it now. Yeah, you can play with the food. Yes, you can. If you're not competent to use your knife and fork, then you can play with food. But you can also make some exercises which, like you do in the training, which enables people to feel what it is to be out of control and what it is. And then afterwards we are going to try to get a course full in December. So there are small steps we are going to take, not intending, but we are going to take them in the next months. And I'm also with Wim together writing some articles and starting up some discussions on fora about control and about leader for greatness in the context of organizations and the questions organizations have today. I think that making that connection and putting a story online, that's also something about neuroscience, of course, the story instead of facts and rationalizing things, getting to the emotion of people. And doing that, we like to bring this further.
Yeah. Donna,
you only talk, but also do.
You got more to add?
Well, the only thing I have to add is just to provide the viewers with where to go for more information. And I have 3 links that we'll put on the site, but let's just work with one. You can email nudge, NUDGE, at turntheshiparound.com to get more information on both what David and Jenny are working together on. So that's just one simple thing, but also look at wherever this video is posted and you'll see those links so you can find out more information.